6 months after my son's wedding, the photographer called me out of the blue, his voice urgent. "Ma'am, I found something in the photos. Please come to my studio tonight. And don't tell your son yet. You need to see this first." I hung up the phone, my hands cold, my heart pounding. It felt like someone had just poured ice water down my spine. The devastation I felt in that moment shattered everything I thought I knew about that beautiful day. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because you need to hear how this nightmare began. 6 months ago, I thought I was watching my only son, David, marry the love of his life. Jessica Miller seemed perfect, blonde, bubbly, and, at least from what I believed, completely in love with my 32-year-old son. As a 58-year-old widow who had raised David alone since his father passed away when he was just 12, I was simply grateful to see him happy. The wedding had been a grand affair at the Rosewood Country Club. Jessica's family spared no expense. 300 guests, a 10-course dinner, an open bar, and Rick Brennan, the most sought-after wedding photographer in Dallas. I remember thinking how lucky David was to be marrying into a family. Who could afford that kind of extravagance? My teacher's pension certainly couldn't have covered it, but now, as I stared at Rick's business card trembling in my hand, I realized that lucky might have been the wrong word entirely. Rick Brennan's studio sat in the Arts District, a converted warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick walls. When I arrived right at 7 p.m., the parking lot was nearly emptied out inside. Rick was waiting behind his desk, looking exhausted. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his usually neat beard was unkempt. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming," he said quickly, standing up. "I've been agonizing over whether to call you for weeks. What did you find?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. After 25 years of teaching high school, I'd learned how to spot trouble from a mile away. Rick pulled out a thick folder and set it on the desk between us. I was organizing the wedding photos for my portfolio when I noticed something odd. So I started looking more carefully. He ran a hand through his hair, hesitating. "Mrs. Thompson," he finally said, "I think your daughter-in-law was having an affair during the wedding reception." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "That's impossible," I said. "Jessica was with David the entire time." "Not the entire time," Rick said quietly. He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. This was taken at 9:47 p.m. during the father-daughter dance. I leaned forward. The photo showed Jessica in her stunning white gown. But she wasn't on the dance floor with her father. Instead, she was near the service entrance to the kitchen, half hidden behind a decorative column. She was embracing a man in a dark suit. Definitely not David, who I could clearly see in the background on the dance floor. Looking around for his bride. "Who is that man?" I whispered. "That's what took me weeks to figure out," Rick said grimly. "His name is Marcus Cole. He's Jessica's cousin. But more importantly, he's also her secret business partner." "Cousin?" I repeated, staring at the photograph that was rewriting everything I thought I knew about my son's wedding day. I remembered David mentioning that Jessica's cousin Marcus would be there. He seemed like a nice young man when I met him briefly at the reception. Rick pulled out another photo and slid it toward me. "That's the thing, Mrs. Thompson. Marcus isn't just family. He and Jessica are business partners, something David doesn't know about." He handed me a printout from the Texas Secretary of State website. "Cole and Miller Financial Consulting. They've been partners for 3 years, Rick explained. "But Jessica has kept it completely hidden from David." I studied the document. My old teacher instincts kicking in, that same sharp eye that could spot a forged hall pass from across the classroom. There it was in black and white. Jessica Miller and Marcus Cole had registered their business in 2022, the same year she'd started dating David. "So Jessica's been running a business with her cousin for 3 years. I said slowly. "And David has no idea?" Even as I asked, a dozen uneasy possibilities began forming in my mind. Why would she keep that secret from her husband? "Take a look at these," Rick said, spreading out more photos across his desk like evidence in an investigation. The timeline was damning. 9:47 p.m., Jessica embracing Marcus near the kitchen. 10:15 p.m., Jessica slipping out the side door while David was giving his thank you speech. 10:23 p.m., Marcus leaving through the same door. 10:45 p.m., Jessica returning, slightly disheveled, saying she'd needed some fresh air. "I remember that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "David was looking for her during his speech. She said she'd felt faint and needed air for 22 minutes. Rick sat there and raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Thompson, there's more." He opened his laptop and pulled up a folder labeled security footage. The screen showed the country club parking lot from several angles. "The club's security system backs up to the cloud. I have contacts there who helped me access the footage." He clicked play on a video stamped 10:17 p.m. I watched Jessica come out, the side entrance and hurried toward a dark sedan parked in the far corner. Marcus was already by the car. They embraced again, more passionately this time, then climbed into the vehicle together. 22 minutes later, Rick said quietly. They returned separately. I sank back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Jessica hadn't just cheated on David at their wedding, she'd done it with her own cousin, who was also her secret business partner, and David had no idea. Rick, why are you showing me this instead of going straight to David? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the photos spread across his desk. Because there's something else, Mrs. Thompson. Something that makes this more complicated than just an affair. More complicated how? I pressed stop rather than answer directly. Rick pulled out another folder. This one labeled financial records. My years as a teacher had trained me to spot mischief in teenagers, but nothing had prepared me for what I was about to learn about financial fraud. Cole & Miller Financial Consulting specializes in investment management for elderly clients, Rick said carefully. Specifically widows and widowers with substantial assets. The pieces started to click together with a sickening clarity. How do you know all this? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling the answer wouldn't be comforting. Because my mother was one of their clients, he said softly. She died 8 months ago, and when I was settling her estate, I discovered some irregularities. Rick opened his laptop again and brought up a string of bank statements. My mother, Eleanor Brennan, was 74 and had early-stage dementia. Someone referred her to Cole & Miller Financial Consulting 18 months ago. They convinced her to transfer her investments to their management. How much? I asked, already dreading the number. $450,000, her entire life savings. My mouth went dry. What happened to it? I croaked. That's what I've been trying to figure out. The official records show various high-risk investments that supposedly failed. But when I hired a forensic accountant, we found that most of those investments never existed. Rick slid a thick folder of financial documents across the desk. Mrs. Thompson, I believe your daughter-in-law and Marcus Cole are running an elaborate con targeting elderly people. They find vulnerable seniors, gain their trust, then systematically drain their accounts. But Jessica's only 29. How would she even know how to do something like that? I asked, incredulous. She's not working alone, Rick said grimly. We think there's a larger network involved. Jessica and Marcus handle the client relationships. But someone else manages the paperwork and moves the money. I looked at the wedding photos again. Everything felt different now. Maybe the affair wasn't even romantic. Maybe it was business. Rick finished. They could have been coordinating during the reception, planning their next target, discussing current cases. Or both. I felt sick. Rick, why haven't you gone to the police with this? I asked. I have. Detective Sarah Martinez is building a case, but she needs more evidence. The financial trail is complicated and the victims. He paused. Many of them are elderly people with memory issues, not ideal witnesses. What about your mother? Can't you prove fraud in her case? I asked. Rick's expression darkened. She's dead, Mrs. Thompson, and according to the coroner, she died of natural causes. Heart failure brought on by stress. But I can't help wondering what kind of stress a sweet old lady would be under if she discovered her life savings had been stolen. The implication hung between us like a toxic cloud. Jessica wasn't just a cheating wife. She might be involved in crimes that had literally scared an elderly woman to death. What do you need from me? I asked. Information about David's finances. About your finances. I need to know if Jessica has access to any significant accounts. If she's pressured David into making investments. If she's mentioned elderly relatives or friends who might need financial advice. I thought back over the last year, replaying conversations with Jessica. She's been very interested in my retirement accounts, I said slowly. She's offered several times to review my investments. Said she had connections who could get me better returns. Rick leaned forward. Did you let her? No, I've been managing my own finances since my husband died 15 years ago. I told her I was happy with my current arrangements. I hesitated. But David's been pressuring me to reconsider. He says Jessica is just trying to help family. Mrs. Thompson, Rick said carefully. I think you and David are their next targets. Next targets. The words echoed in my head like a warning bell. I thought about every conversation I'd had with Jessica over the past year. Every seemingly harmless question about my retirement. Every friendly offer to help with paperwork. How sure are you about this? I asked Rick. Sure enough that I've been losing sleep for weeks, he replied. Mrs. Thompson, can I ask you some personal questions? I nodded, though every instinct told me I wasn't going to like where this was headed. Do you own your home outright? Yes, I said. Paid it off 5 years ago. And yes, I have significant retirement savings between my teacher's pension, my husband's life insurance, and my 401k. Any investments Jessica would know about? I thought carefully. David mentioned my portfolio a few times when Jessica was around. He's always been proud that his schoolteacher mother managed to build a comfortable nest egg. Rick scribbled notes on a legal pad. Have they invited you to any financial seminars? Introduced you to investment advisors? Suggested changes to your estate planning? Actually, yes, the memory came flooding back. 2 months ago, Jessica invited me to something she called a retirement security workshop. She said it was specifically for educators to show me how to maximize my pension benefits. Did you go? Rick asked. No, I had a parent-teacher conference that night. But Jessica seemed disappointed when I canceled. I paused. She rescheduled it twice, trying to find a time I could attend. Rick and I exchanged a look across the desk, both of us silently grasping the implications. If Jessica was part of a larger financial fraud operation, a retirement security workshop would be the perfect place to find elderly targets with substantial savings. Rick, I need to see more of those photos, I said firmly. All of them, he hesitated. Mrs. Thompson, some of these are difficult to look at. If David is truly innocent in all this, these images will destroy him. If David is innocent, I said, straightening my shoulders, then he deserves to know what kind of woman he married before she destroys him financially. Show me everything. Rick opened the largest folder yet. These are the photos I couldn't include in the official wedding album. What I saw over the next 30 minutes painted a horrifying picture, a wedding reception that was less a celebration and more a carefully planned business meeting. Jessica and Marcus weren't just sneaking off for stolen moments of romance. They were methodically meeting with various guests throughout the evening. Who is this man? I asked, pointing to a photo of Jessica in deep conversation with an elderly gentleman by the bar. Herbert Williams, 83 years old, Rick said. He attended the wedding as Jessica's honorary grandfather, no actual relation. He invested his Social Security savings with Cole and Miller Financial 6 weeks after the wedding. And this woman? I asked, pointing to another photo. Patricia Dean, 79, Marcus's aunt. She transferred her late husband's pension to their management. 2 weeks after meeting them at your son's reception, I felt sick. They used David's wedding as a networking event. It appears so, Mrs. Thompson, Rick said grimly. I've identified at least 12 people from that reception who became clients of Cole and Miller Financial within 2 months of the wedding. The total assets they've accessed so far exceed $2 million. My stomach turned. What about the people who didn't invest? Some are harder to trace, he admitted. But 3 elderly guests have died in the past 6 months, all from stress-related conditions. All after making significant investments with Jessica and Marcus. The room started spinning. My son's wedding hadn't been a celebration at all. It had been a carefully orchestrated crime scene. And David, my sweet, trusting son, had unknowingly provided the perfect cover for it. Rick, we have to tell David tonight, I said, pushing back my chair. Mrs. Thompson. Wait, Rick reached out and gently grabbed my arm. There's one more thing you need to know before we involve David. What now? I demanded. I think Jessica knows I've been investigating. What do you mean she knows? The words came out sharper than I intended, but his statement sent a chill straight down my spine. 3 days ago, someone broke into my studio, Rick said. Nothing was stolen, but my computer files were accessed. Specifically the folder with the wedding photos and my research into Cole and Miller Financial. I sank back into my chair. Are you sure it was Jessica? The break-in happened the same night Jessica had dinner with David at Romano's, the restaurant directly across from my studio. The security footage shows someone entering my building at 9:47 p.m. Jessica and David's dinner receipt is time-stamped 9:52 p.m. So she could have slipped out during dinner. I said slowly. Rick nodded. The restaurant's bathroom is on the 2nd floor, right next to a fire exit that leads to the alley behind my building. She could have excused herself, broken and accessed my files, and been back at the table in 15 minutes. My teacher instincts were screaming. This was the behavior of someone who'd been cheating on tests her whole life. Always one step ahead. Always with an alibi. What did she find on your computer? I asked. Everything we've discussed tonight, the photos, the financial records, my mother's case, the list of elderly victims. Rick ran a hand through his hair. Mrs. Thompson. If Jessica knows we're on to her, she might accelerate whatever timeline she has for David and you, meaning. The words echoed in my head like a warning bell. Meaning she might try to access your assets immediately. Before we can expose her, I thought about the phone call I'd received just this morning. Jessica asking if I'd reconsider her offer to review my investment portfolio. Her voice had sounded unusually urgent, almost desperate. She called me today, Rick said. She said she had some time-sensitive investment opportunities that would be perfect for someone in your situation. His expression darkened. What kind of opportunities? Something about municipal bonds with guaranteed returns. She wanted to set up a meeting for tomorrow afternoon, Mrs. Thompson. Legitimate municipal bonds don't have guaranteed returns above market rate. She's trying to set you up, but why now? If she's been planning this for a year, why the sudden urgency? I asked. Rick pulled out his phone and showed me a news article dated 3 days ago. Because this story broke in the Dallas Business Journal. Local investment firm under investigation for elder fraud. They don't name Cole and Miller specifically. But word is getting out that the FBI is building cases against financial advisors targeting seniors. I read the article twice, my heart racing. So Jessica is trying to cash out before the investigation reaches her. Exactly, Mrs. Thompson. I think tomorrow's meeting is her end game. She's going to try to get you to transfer everything. I stood and began to pace, looking out the window at the same parking lot where Jessica had been conducting secret business during what should have been the happiest night of my son's life. Rick, we have to stop her, but if we go to David with this now without absolute proof, she'll just deny everything and disappear. We'll never be able to help the other victims. What are you suggesting? I turned back to him, feeling that same stubborn determination that had carried me through 15 years of single motherhood and 25 years of dealing with teenage drama. I'm suggesting we give Jessica exactly what she wants, tomorrow's meeting, but with a few modifications she isn't expecting, Mrs. Thompson. That's extremely dangerous, Rick said. If Jessica is as desperate as we think she is, Rick, I've spent my entire career dealing with manipulative teenagers who think they're smarter than the adults around them. Trust me, I know how to handle someone like Jessica. I smiled, feeling clearer-headed than I had all evening. What did you have in mind? We're going to let Jessica think she's won, and then we're going to destroy her. The next morning I woke with a clarity that comes from finally understanding the true nature of a problem. I'd spent the night researching investment fraud, elder abuse, and Texas laws about recording conversations. By 6 a.m., I had a plan. Rick had connected me with Detective Sarah Martinez the night before, and she'd agreed to meet us at 7 a.m. at a coffee shop near the police station. Sarah turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with the no-nonsense demeanor I recognized from years of dealing with school administrators. Mrs. Thompson, she said as she settled into our corner booth with a large black coffee. Rick has filled me in on the situation. I have to say, what you're proposing is risky. More risky than letting Jessica steal from more elderly people, I countered. Fair point. But if this goes wrong, you could be putting yourself in physical danger. We don't know how desperate Jessica and her partners are. I pulled out my phone and showed Sarah the text I'd received at 6:30 a.m. Margaret, so excited about our meeting today. I found an investment opportunity that could double your retirement savings in 6 months. Can we move our meeting to 2 p.m. instead? I have the paperwork ready. Jessica, 6 months to double my money, I said dryly. That doesn't sound suspicious at all. Detective Martinez laughed despite herself. Okay, I can see why you want to nail her, but we need to do this legally and safely. Over the next hour we worked out the details. I would meet Jessica as planned, but Detective Martinez would be listening from the next room with a recording device. Rick would be positioned outside with backup officers. Most importantly, I would not sign anything or transfer any actual money. The goal was to get Jessica to explicitly state what she was doing and how the scheme worked. Detective Martinez explained, if we can get her to admit fraud on tape, especially with details about other victims, we'll have enough for a conviction. What about Marcus and the rest of their network? One step at a time, I said. If we can flip Jessica, she might give us the bigger fish. At 1:45 p.m., I arrived at Jessica's office building in downtown Dallas. The suite number she'd given me led to a generic office space with temporary furniture and motivational posters that looked like they'd been purchased at a gas station. Classic temporary setup, designed to look legitimate but easy to abandon quickly. Jessica greeted me with an enthusiastic hug and her usual $1,000,000 smile. Margaret, you look wonderful. I'm so glad you decided to take control of your financial future. Well, you've been so persistent, I said, settling into the uncomfortable folding chair across from her desk. And David speaks so highly of your expertise. David is such a sweetheart. He just wants the best for his mother. Jessica pulled out a thick folder. Now, I've been working with my partner Marcus to identify some exclusive opportunities that would be perfect for someone with your background and assets. Your partner Marcus? I asked innocently. I don't think David's mentioned him. A brief flicker crossed Jessica's face. Marcus handles the more sophisticated investment strategies. He works behind the scenes mostly. I'd love to meet him. Is he here today? Unfortunately, no. He's closing a major deal for another client. But don't worry, I have full authority to handle your account. Jessica opened the folder and pulled out several official-looking documents. Now, I'll need some basic information about your current holdings. For the next 20 minutes, I fed Jessica carefully crafted lies about my financial situation, inflating my assets just enough to make me an attractive target but not so much that she'd become suspicious. She took detailed notes, asking probing questions about my accounts, my beneficiaries, and my estate planning. The opportunity I want to discuss with you today, Jessica said, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, is something we only offer to very special clients. Municipal bonds backed by offshore tax shelters that guarantee a 25% return in 6 months. That sounds too good to be true, I said, playing the cautious grandmother perfectly. That's what all our clients say initially, Jessica laughed. But Margaret, we've never had a client lose money on this program, never. In fact, Mrs. Patterson from your neighborhood just doubled her Social Security investments with us last month. Mrs. Patterson? My heart sank. Eleanor Patterson was 87 and had been showing signs of memory problems for months. Really, Eleanor invested with you? Oh, yes? She's one of our most successful clients. In fact, Jessica lowered her voice. She's already made enough profit to buy that new car she's been wanting. That was impossible. Eleanor didn't drive anymore and had been talking about selling her car for months. Jessica was either lying about Eleanor's success or lying about Eleanor's involvement entirely. How much would I need to invest to see those kinds of returns? I asked. Jessica's eyes lit up with predatory excitement. For the full program, we recommend transferring all liquid assets to maximize the compound growth potential. She had just walked directly into Detective Martinez's trap. All liquid assets? I repeated, letting my voice carry the right mix of elderly confusion and greed. That seems like quite a lot to invest at once. Margaret, I understand your hesitation. But think about it. You've worked your whole life, sacrificed so much to build your nest egg. Don't you deserve to see it grow dramatically in your golden years? Jessica leaned forward, her expression shifting into practiced sincerity. After dealing with manipulative teenagers for 25 years, I could spot fake empathy from across a football field. The thing is, she continued, this opportunity has a very limited window. My offshore partners can only accept a certain number of new investors each quarter. And we're down to the last 2 spots. Classic high-pressure sales tactics. Create artificial scarcity to force quick decisions. How much time do I have to decide? I asked. Ideally, we'd want to submit your paperwork today. I know it seems fast, but Margaret, I've seen too many people miss out on life-changing opportunities because they waited too long. Jessica pulled out a transfer authorization form that looked official enough to fool most people, but I'd spent years grading papers, and I could spot a document hurriedly created in Microsoft Word. This form would give her authorization to move my funds temporarily while they set up the new accounts. It was presented as a standard procedure. Jessica's smile never wavered, but I caught her glancing at her watch. The offshore markets close at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so we do need to move quickly before I sign anything. Could you tell me more about some of your other successful clients besides Eleanor Patterson? I asked. Jessica hesitated for just a moment. Well, there's Herbert Williams. He's made over $200,000 in profits this year. Herbert Williams. Rick had identified him as one of the elderly guests from David's wedding, the one who'd lost his entire Social Security savings to Cole and Miller Financial. That's wonderful, I said. Could I speak with Herbert? Get his recommendation directly? Oh, Herbert is traveling in Europe right now, enjoying his profits, Jessica said quickly. But I can show you his account statements. She pulled out a document that supposedly showed Herbert's investment gains. The numbers looked impressive until you noticed they were printed on plain paper, with no letterhead or official verification. I'd seen more convincing fake report cards from students trying to avoid parent conferences. Jessica, can I ask you something personal? Of course, Margaret. I want you to feel completely comfortable with this process. How did you become so knowledgeable about investments? David mentioned you work in marketing. Another flicker crossed her face. I do work in marketing, but I've been studying financial management as a side interest. Marcus has been mentoring me, teaching me about international markets and specialized investment vehicles. How did you meet Marcus? Marcus is my cousin. We grew up in the same area. He helped me get started in this business. Jessica's answers were becoming shorter, more clipped. She was clearly uncomfortable with questions that strayed from her sales script. And the two of you decided to help elderly people specifically? We focus on mature investors because they often have assets that aren't working as hard as they could be. People like you, Margaret, who've been conservative with their money but deserve to see real growth. That's very thoughtful of you. I paused, pretending to study the transfer form. Jessica, I have to ask. David doesn't know about your business partnership with Marcus, does he? What do you mean? I mean, you haven't told him about your investment business, about being business partners with your cousin, about any of this. Jessica's mask slipped completely for just a moment. And I saw something cold and calculating underneath. David doesn't need to worry about financial matters, she said. He's focused on his career and I handle our investment strategies. Our investment strategies? I repeated. So, David's money is involved too? Just small amounts so far. Nothing significant. Jessica glanced at her watch again. Margaret, I really do need a decision today. This opportunity, I'll do it, I said suddenly. Jessica's face lit up with genuine surprise and delight. Really? Oh, Margaret, you're making such a smart choice. You won't regret this. I just need to make one quick phone call to my bank to confirm some account numbers, I said, pulling out my phone. Is that okay? Of course. Take your time. I stepped into the hallway and pretended to dial my bank while actually texting Detective Martinez. She's admitting to investing David's money without his knowledge. Keep recording. When I returned to the office, Jessica had multiple forms spread across her desk. Okay, she said brightly. I've prepared everything. If you could just sign here, here, and initial here before I sign, I said calmly. Could you walk me through exactly how this process works? I want to understand where my money will be going, and that's when Jessica made her fatal mistake. Thinking she had me hooked, she began explaining in detail how the money would be transferred to Marcus's accounts, how the offshore investments were actually just holding accounts, and how the fake returns were generated using new investor money. She was describing a textbook Ponzi scheme, and Detective Martinez was recording every word. So the returns I see in my account statements, I said, making sure I understood correctly, those come from new investors, not from actual investment profits? Well, initially, yes, Jessica said, apparently not realizing she just confessed to securities fraud. But as the program grows and we acquire more sophisticated investment vehicles, the returns become self-sustaining. And Marcus handles the technical aspects of moving money between accounts. Marcus is brilliant with financial structures. He set up a network of accounts that allow us to maximize returns while minimizing tax implications. Jessica was gaining confidence now, clearly thinking she was impressing me with their sophistication. How many clients do you currently manage? I asked. We're approaching 50 active accounts, with total assets under management of about $12 million. $12 million. The number hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a small-time scam targeting a few elderly people. This was a massive operation that had been systematically destroying lives for months, possibly years. That's quite impressive for such a young business, I said. Marcus has been building relationships in this space for almost 5 years. I joined him 2 years ago, when I realized how much potential there was to help underserved populations like retirees and widows. Help. She actually used the word help while describing how they stole life savings from vulnerable elderly people. Jessica, can I ask how you and David met? Was it through your investment work? Oh no, she said smoothly. We met at a charity fundraiser for senior services. David was volunteering and I was there representing our financial planning services. Jessica smiled at the memory. He was so passionate about helping elderly people and I knew we'd be perfect together. The irony was breathtaking. David had met his wife at a charity event for seniors, never knowing she was there to scout potential fraud victims. That's so romantic, I said. And he's been supportive of your business. David's wonderful. But he doesn't really understand finance. He prefers to focus on his engineering work and let me handle our investment planning. Jessica's tone shifted slightly. Sometimes I think it's better when spouses don't get too involved in each other's professional details. It can complicate the relationship. Has David invested with you directly? I asked. Small amounts, she said. His 401k rollover, some savings bonds, nothing major yet. But as the business grows, she trailed off, realizing she might be saying too much. You're planning to invest more of David's money only as opportunities arise that would benefit our family's long-term financial goals. I had to bite my tongue to keep from asking if those goals included federal prison sentences. Jessica, these forms you want me to sign, they look quite comprehensive. Should I have my attorney review them first? For the first time since we'd started talking, Jessica looked genuinely concerned. Margaret, attorneys often don't understand complex investment vehicles. They tend to be overly cautious and can cause you to miss time-sensitive opportunities. But surely for this amount of money, I began. What I can do, Jessica interrupted, is offer you a smaller trial investment, say $50,000 to start. You can see the returns for yourself and then we can discuss larger amounts once you're comfortable with the process. $50,000, pocket change compared to what she thought I had. but still enough to ruin most people's retirement plans. That sounds more reasonable, I said. But I still don't understand why this has to be done today. Because the quarter closes tomorrow, and my offshore partners won't accept new investments until January, Margaret. If you wait, you'll miss 6 months of potential gains. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and saw a text from Detective Martinez. We have enough. Get out safely. You know what, Jessica? This all sounds wonderful, but I think I do want to discuss it with David first. As my only family, I feel like he should know about major financial decisions. Jessica's expression hardened. Margaret, I thought we agreed that David doesn't need to be involved in every detail of your financial planning. I've changed my mind. David is a smart man, and if this investment is as good as you say it is, he'll want to participate. Actually, that might not be possible. Jessica's voice took on a cold edge I hadn't heard before. These programs have very specific investor profiles, and David might not qualify. Why wouldn't he qualify? I demanded. Age restrictions, minimum asset requirements, various technical factors. She was clearly making it up as she went along. Margaret, I strongly advise you to make this decision independently. Involving David could complicate everything. I stood up and gathered my purse. I appreciate all the time you've spent explaining this, Jessica, but I think I need to sleep on it. Margaret, please sit down. We're not finished here. The change in her tone was startling. Gone was the sweet, concerned daughter-in-law. In her place stood someone who sounded desperate and potentially dangerous. I really do need to go, I said, moving toward the door. No, Jessica said firmly. You don't understand. We've already committed your spot to the offshore partners. If you don't complete the transaction today, there will be penalties. That was when I knew Detective Martinez had been right about the danger. Jessica wasn't just going to let me walk away. Penalties? I asked, my hand freezing on the door handle. What kind of penalties? Commitment fees, administrative costs, lost opportunity expenses. Jessica was inventing terms on the spot, but her voice carried a threatening undertone that made my heart race. Margaret, these international investment groups don't take contract breaches lightly. But I haven't signed any contracts the moment you agreed to participate. I submitted preliminary paperwork on your behalf. Backing out now could result in legal action. I turned back to face her. And for the first time since I'd met Jessica, I saw her without the mask. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the cold calculation in her eyes. And her designer smile had been replaced by something almost predatory. Jessica, I haven't agreed to anything definitive. I said I'd consider it. No, Margaret. You said, and I quote, I'll do it. I have witnesses to that conversation. What witnesses? We're alone in this office. Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me an active call that had been running for the past 30 minutes. Marcus has been listening to our entire conversation. He heard your verbal commitment, and he's already begun processing your investment application. My blood ran cold. If Marcus had been listening, he'd also heard me asking detailed questions about their operation, gathering information about their other victims, and trying to get Jessica to incriminate herself. They knew I was investigating them. I want to speak to Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Unfortunately, he's in a meeting with other investors. But he asked me to make sure we complete your paperwork today before there are any misunderstandings. Jessica moved between me and the door, and I realized I was essentially trapped in a small office with someone who had just revealed herself to be far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. Jessica, I'm going to leave now. We can discuss this later with David present. I'm afraid that's not possible. She pulled out a contract that was far more detailed than the form she'd shown me earlier. This is a binding investment agreement. You need to sign it today. I glanced at the document and felt my blood pressure spike. It wasn't just an investment contract. It was a comprehensive financial power of attorney that would give Jessica control over all my assets. This gives you complete access to my accounts, I said, only temporarily while we optimize your investment portfolio. It's standard procedure for international transactions. Nothing about this was standard, and we both knew it. Jessica was essentially demanding I sign over my entire life savings right then, with threats of legal consequences if I refused and if I don't sign. Margaret, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. You came here today because you trust me, because you want to secure your financial future. Don't let fear of success sabotage this opportunity. She was still trying to keep up the pretense of legitimacy, but her body language told a different story, positioned between me and the only exit. Phone still connected to Marcus, making it clear leaving wasn't an option. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, Rick's voice in the hallway, loud enough to be audible through the thin office walls. Excuse me. I'm looking for Suite 247. I'm here to meet with Cole and Miller Financial Consulting. Jessica's face went pale. Who is that? She asked. I have no idea, I said innocently, though my heart pounded with relief. Rick and Detective Martinez were executing their backup plan, Margaret. You need to sign this document right now. Jessica thrust the contract toward me, her composure finally cracking completely. Or what? I asked, feeling braver now that help was just outside, or Marcus will be very disappointed. And Marcus doesn't like to be disappointed. The threat was unmistakable. Now Jessica had dropped any pretense of legitimacy and was essentially demanding my money at gunpoint, metaphorically speaking. Though I briefly wondered about literal implications. That's when Detective Martinez's voice joined Rick's in the hallway. Dallas police, we're looking for Suite 247. Jessica spun toward the door, panic flooding her features. You set me up. No, Jessica, I said. You set yourself up the moment you decided to steal from elderly people and use my son as cover for your crimes. The door burst open and Detective Martinez entered with 2 uniformed officers. Jessica Miller, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and securities violations. As they read her rights, she stared at me with pure hatred. You don't understand what you've done. Marcus won't let this stand. This organization is bigger than you realize, maybe, I said calmly. But it's about to get a lot smaller. As they led Jessica away in handcuffs, I felt relief and dread at once. We'd stopped her from stealing my money and we had enough evidence to put her away for a long time. But her final words, this organization is bigger than you realize, echoed in my mind. I had a sinking feeling Jessica Miller was just the tip of the iceberg. 3 hours later, I sat in Detective Martinez's office, still processing everything that had happened. The recording device had captured Jessica's detailed confession about the Ponzi scheme, her admission about using new investor money to pay fake returns, and her threats. When I tried to leave, I said, Mrs. Thompson, what you did today was incredibly brave, Detective Martinez said, reviewing her notes. But Jessica was right about one thing. This organization is much larger than we initially thought. How much larger? I asked, based on the information Jessica provided during questioning. Miller Financial is part of a network operating in 6 states. We're talking about potentially 50 to 60 people involved, managing fraud schemes worth tens of millions of dollars. Rick, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. What about the victims? Can any of the money be recovered? Some of it? Detective Martinez said, hopefully, but Margaret, I need to warn you, Detective Martinez said. Jessica's arrest will send shockwaves through their network. Marcus Cole and the other organizers will know their operation has been compromised, meaning? I asked quietly, meaning they'll either disappear with whatever money they can still access, or they'll escalate their efforts to extract assets from existing victims before law enforcement can stop them. I thought about Eleanor Patterson, 87 years old and already showing signs of memory loss. About Herbert Williams, who'd supposedly lost his entire Social Security savings. About all the elderly people who'd attended David's wedding, completely unaware they were walking into a trap. What about David? I asked softly. How do we tell him that his wife is a criminal, that she used their wedding as a recruiting event for fraud victims? Detective Martinez exchanged a look with Rick. Actually, Mrs. Thompson, she said gently, David is outside. He's been waiting for over an hour to talk to you. My heart sank. He knows we had to bring him in for questioning once Jessica was arrested, Martinez said. He's not handling it well. I followed her down the hallway to a small conference room. David sat slumped in a chair, looking like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, he said brokenly, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I swear to you, I had no idea what Jessica was doing. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his shoulders shake with quiet sobs. I know, sweetheart. I know you didn't know. She was using me, he said, his voice cracking. Using our marriage, our wedding, everything. Those people at our reception, they weren't guests. They were targets. David pulled back to look at me. Mom, she has access to some of my accounts. My 401k rollover, about $75,000 in savings bonds, we'll figure it out. I said firmly. The important thing is that you're safe, and now we know the truth. But how could I have been so blind? He asked, his voice breaking. Looking back, there were signs. The secretive phone calls, the business trips she never wanted to talk about. The way she always deflected questions about her work. David ran his hands through his hair. And Marcus, I thought he was just her cousin who lived out of state. I never suspected they were business partners running a criminal operation. God, she even used my love for you against me. Always pushing me to encourage you to optimize your investments. David, I said gently. You fell in love with who you thought she was. That's not your fault. Detective Martinez cleared her throat. David, I need to ask, did Jessica ever mention any elderly relatives, family friends, or acquaintances who might have significant assets. David nodded grimly. She was always very interested in my coworkers' families, especially anyone who mentioned elderly parents or grandparents with money. She'd suggest I invite them to dinner, say she'd love to meet them. His face crumpled. She was using me to scout for victims. We're going to need a list of anyone Jessica showed particular interest in meeting. Martinez said. Of course, David replied. Whatever you need. Rick leaned forward. David, this might be difficult to hear, but we think Jessica and Marcus used your wedding reception as an active recruitment event. We've identified at least 12 people who became their clients within weeks of attending your wedding. 12 people, David whispered, staring down at the table. 12 elderly people who trusted me enough to attend my wedding, and I led them into a trap. You didn't lead anyone anywhere, I said firmly. Jessica orchestrated this. You were a victim too, a victim who married the predator. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of Jessica's deception pressing down on all of us. Finally, Detective Martinez spoke again. There is some good news, she said. Jessica's cooperation will be essential in building cases against the rest of the network. If she provides substantial assistance, many of the victims might recover at least some of their money. Will she cooperate? I asked. She's facing 20 to 30 years in federal prison without cooperation, Martinez said. With cooperation, she might get 10 to 15. She'll make the smart choice. 3 months later, Jessica did exactly that. Her detailed testimony led to the arrest of Marcus Cole and 17 other members of their fraud network. The investigation uncovered schemes in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Colorado, with total victim losses exceeding $40 million. Eleanor Patterson recovered 60% of her Social Security savings. Herbert Williams got back about half of his life savings. Dozens of other elderly victims received partial restitution, though many would never fully recover from the financial and emotional damage they'd suffered. David filed for divorce immediately after Jessica's arrest. The process was complicated by the criminal proceedings, but 6 months later, he was legally free from the woman who'd turned his wedding day into a crime scene. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best way to protect your family is to trust your instincts, ask uncomfortable questions, and never underestimate the power of a determined teacher. Facing down someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone else in the room. Rick's studio eventually went back to focusing on happy occasions instead of criminal investigations, but he kept my contact information. Every so often, we'd meet for coffee and compare notes on suspicious financial advisors targeting elderly clients. Because, as Jessica had warned us during her arrest, organizations like theirs don't disappear easily. They evolve, they adapt, and they always have a new generation of con artists ready to take advantage of people's trust and their love for their families. But what they always underestimate is how much fight there is in a mother protecting her son, or a photographer seeking justice for his mother, or a detective determined to protect vulnerable seniors. And sometimes, just sometimes, that underestimation is exactly what brings them down. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.